Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this week's PAVE virtual panel. We will start very shortly. We're just going to give folks a few seconds to enter in from the waiting room. And while we wait, as a reminder, you will be able to find the full recording of this panel, as well as all of our other previous panels on our website at pavecampaign.org or on our YouTube channel or on social media. So I want to welcome you all to our 128th virtual panel. Today we are going to be talking about how public and private partnerships can help advance CAV technologies, with a special focus on a recent event that we held, CAV Innovation Day in Louisiana. So my name is Caitlin Magny Miller. I'm PAVE's Communications Director. I'm going to be moderating this conversation, and I'm going to start by introducing our guests. We have Greg Rodriguez of Stantec, Josh Fleig of Louisiana Economic Development, and Tara Andringa, Executive Director here at PAVE. So welcome, everybody. And let's start with some intros. How about you each give us a bit of a background on yourselves and your respective companies? And should we start with you, Josh?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Josh Fleig, I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at Louisiana Innovation. We are a division of Louisiana Economic Development. So we're a state agency focused on driving economic development across the 64 parishes or counties, as all the other states refer to them, in Louisiana. And we're fairly new to the job. I personally have been in the role since July of last year. The entire administration came into office the beginning of 24. So we're about a year and a half in, and this is also a new practice for Louisiana. This Office of Innovation is something we stood up and really announced publicly in February. So it's really a new initiative to say that the future of Louisiana is building innovation into what we consider our asset industries.
Absolutely. Should we pass it over to Greg?
Sure. Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, Tara. And thank you, Josh, for joining us. Congrats on so many PAVEcasts. That's amazing. They're always informative and efficient, which is the key to life. My name is Greg Rodriguez. I'm with Stantec, based out of Washington, D.C. I'm part of our management and technology consulting group. What that means is I take my legal and regulatory and governance experience around emerging technologies and try and figure out how do we actually put things into motion. And I think what we're going to talk about today is a good example of that. Recommendations related to how we do events like this are often in plans, but we wanted to take a recommendation and put it into action. So very happy to be here today and looking forward to talking about the great event you all helped us put on.
Great, and I'm Tara Andringa, and I'm the Executive Director of PAVE. Hopefully, most of you are familiar with PAVE, but we are a 501c3 nonprofit, and our mission is to help the public understand automated technologies. And we both work with groups in the public and also public sector entities who are hoping to bring automated technologies to their communities. We both help the communities to prepare and help them to raise the level of understanding of people in their communities. So I'm really excited about this conversation. We were just thrilled to partner with both Josh and Greg in creating this wonderful event in Louisiana, and look forward to many more in the future.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. So I'm going to come back to you, Greg. You really championed this idea of a CAV Innovation Day early on. I remember the meetings where you had a vision and a lot of excitement around this idea. So can you tell us how this event came to be?
Sure. Thanks, Caitlin. So like I was kind of hinting at the outset of my intro remarks, we've been fortunate enough to be supporting Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development on its second iteration of its CAV working group. It's had a CAV working group since 2017. The first iteration of that working group focused on a strategic plan. Our role in this phase two was making sure the actual CIV landscape aligned with where the strategic plan wanted to go. So as Josh knows very well, and you all know, we can have these strategic plans, but if they are not constantly evolving and adapting as the technology matures, then, they become outdated very quickly. So as part of that second iteration of the working group, one of the findings was that we need to understand where private industry sees Louisiana with regard to autonomous vehicles, and relatedly, how does private industry want to partner with Louisiana? So as I was mentioning, we were wrapping up the second iteration of the working group, and instead of just putting a recommendation into a report, we said, well, can we get some money and some momentum to actually put this event on in a very short amount of time? There were two things that pushed the winds of the innovation sails, if you will. One thing that Josh can talk about is Waymo announced that it was doing a road trip in New Orleans. So that was a great catalyst. And then, what Josh already talked about, Louisiana's focus as a state through Louisiana Economic Development, to be pushing the innovation conversation. And so, thanks to Josh Harouche, the ITS director at LADOTD, and his team, they were willing to to kind of take a risk in putting together an event in a very short amount of time, as we could talk about, and to leverage that momentum and put together the great event that we did. So, as you said, Caitlin, it started with a spark, but we were able to catch some momentum and put all the right partners together to move this forward. And I have to, say thanks to all our sponsors as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a labor of love and a team effort that certainly wouldn't have been possible without them. Josh, I'm going to come back to you here. This event was kind of a first for Louisiana, which as a state has really put more emphasis on fostering innovation over the past year or so. From an economic development perspective, how do you see CAV innovations contributing to Louisiana's future workforce and innovation goals? And furthermore, how can partnerships between public and private sectors really support this?
Yeah. So it's critically important to I think the globe's future. And so not, not just Louisiana, but everyone. The reality is that automation, robotics, artificial intelligence, is going to fundamentally change the nature of work. What we're trying to understand is how Louisiana can be in that conversation from all angles, right? So how do we prepare for that? So what do we need to do to invest today into test beds, policy frameworks, workforce development initiatives, seed capital for kind of early stage technologists, so that we have a seat at the table. Most of our history we've been very reactive to what we have in Louisiana, which is the trade and logistics because of our proximity to the Gulf of Mexico and the foot of the Mississippi River, and natural resources, right? The extraction of minerals and refining of minerals, and and then putting those minerals on a barge and pushing them out through the mouth of the Mississippi. But that, all of that is going to change, and all of the ways we move those goods are going to continue to evolve. And then one of the other components to this is really our defense industry as well. I mean, we're a major shipbuilder in Louisiana, and so knowing that this administration is keen on kind of reigniting shipbuilding in the United States to catch up with our adversaries, and that we're going to see significant investment in that arena as well. We have to be prepared to be competitive in that world, because we know that the shipbuilding of 2025 and beyond is not going to look the same as the shipbuilding previous years. So really, it's about being competitive, having a seat at this table, and making sure that we're open for business and we're an innovative test bed for a lot of this technology.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think what you've done is gone from sort of, like you said, a reactive approach to really a more proactive one, which I really applaud. Tara, I'm going to switch over to you here. Education and public trust, obviously, go hand in hand when it comes to AVs. How can, in your opinion, the public sector and the industry partner to not only educate, but also build confidence in the safety and the benefits of these CAV technologies, especially among communities with, say, less exposure to AVs?
For sure. And you're right, especially in communities where people don't see autonomous cars driving around, what we see is a lot of confusion and mistrust. And it makes sense. Humans have spent the last 100 years driving in cars that are driven by a human. So the idea of a robot driving you is can be kind of scary. And so that's what we try to work to do, is to help people kind of demystify the technology. We've done a lot of polling, and what we have seen that the two things that move people are education and exposure. So the more people know about the technology, the safer they feel, and the more exposure they've had, the more comfortable they are with the idea of riding it with a robot. So what PAVE tries to do is kind of serve as a convener to bring together the public sector and the private sector, and to provide education and exposure to, communities. And I give Louisiana a ton of credit for, like you said, never having done this before, and bringing all these people together. And we had an autonomous truck and an autonomous car to let people kind of see this is how these vehicles are tested. This is how they work. We also had posters showing different kinds of research that's been going on, and really letting people see kind of all aspects of autonomy. Um, it really is a local phenomenon. The way that autonomous vehicles are coming out is kind of one city at a time, and like the ODD, the operational design domain, keeps expanding. But we'd like to work with each community to both teach the public about the technology, to help cities prepare. What we hear is a lot of cities kind of don't know where to begin in terms of teaching first responders and infrastructure and all these different issues that they need to think about. So we help cities prepare for the technology. We help to teach the public. We'd like to also listen to the needs of the public. What are your transportation needs that aren't being addressed? How can we integrate this technology into your existing transit systems? Like, where are the gaps? So yeah, so this was a great event to kind of have those conversations with the state. And like I said, we work with communities and states all over the country to keep forwarding these same goals.
Definitely. And I love what you said about, it being so community specific. You might visit San Francisco and people's comfort with AVs is going to be much different than it is in, say, Baton Rouge or, wherever else it might be. So I think that's an important point. Um, Greg, coming back to you here, cross-sector collaboration is obviously critical to advancing these technologies, which we have discussed. What are some of the biggest opportunities and challenges you see in aligning efforts among, say, government, industry, and academia in Louisiana and also other states?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question, and it builds upon, I think, what Tara was talking about, that demonstration element. So another, key focus of the event, which was a success when you saw people's faces when they interacted with the autonomous truck and the car, is just to show people that it's here today, and to make sure policymakers understand that, when you're implementing regulations, when you're discussing like legislation, this isn't something that's a figment of our imagination. It's something that you need to understand, and that we're making sure that you're making informed decisions around things that can really impact the success of the operations, and making sure the opportunities are maximized. And a big part of that cross-sector part of it, probably starts with what we had with the CAV working group. So even before you talk about industry and government, you have to talk about what we experience within DOTD and the different sections within DOTD. So you have safety, you have law enforcement, you have ITS, and you have traffic management. A lot of times, those sections are not talking to each other around the innovation side of things. Yes, they're collaborating, but they tend to often be collaborating in silos. So to really, again, have an event like this where all of DOTD could come down, because we did it at the campus, and to see some of the conversations foster at that foundational level, hopefully it inspires more of that cross-section collaboration within DOTD. And then, with the cross-sector part of it, where, Josh could get into this a little bit more, but again, understanding the different players that come with this ecosystem. We had AV providers, but we also had companies like Cisco there. We had companies like Michelin Mobility Intelligence, talking about these foundational layers related to ITS, related to AI, like Josh mentioned, to make sure we're investing in the future, to make sure all of this works cohesively, and overcome some of the challenge around interoperability. I think that is the opportunity to really cultivate these public-private partnerships. And, some of the things we're looking forward to doing next based on what we saw at the event. And really looking forward to the momentum that we have.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you make some great points. And to kind of build on this, Josh, from your point of view, how can state governments sort of balance innovation from the private sector with regulation to ensure safety without stifling growth? And then furthermore, what funding opportunities or programs are there available to support this growth and progress?
Yeah, so it's a great question. It's so early. It's certainly early for the deployment of this technology in a state like Louisiana because we're not, we're not seeing commercial rides yet for, Waymos, for example. They're doing testing here, but they're not fully driverless, and they don't have passengers in the cars. Some of the truck traffic that's hauling, cargo to and from, through interstates in Louisiana still have drivers in those cabs. So we're seeing it begin to touch Louisiana, but we're not seeing it like rolled out in any sort of like super meaningful kind of commercial ways just yet. So the good thing is we don't have a lot of restrictive policy in place today that overly restrict that activity, but because it's certainly not necessary today either. And if you talk to some of these technology makers, that's their preference at this point in the game, right? Is not to introduce overly restrictive technology because it seems to be putting the cart before the horse a little bit, until we really understand what the impacts are locally. So I also think that we're just it doesn't make a lot of sense for states to begin to kind of introduce regulations on automation and artificial intelligence, robotics in any meaningful way at the state level just yet, because I don't know that they're best suited to do that. There was a bill filed in DC a couple of weeks ago that introduced a concept of putting a moratorium on states introducing regulations on artificial intelligence. To be determined whether that goes through or passes or not, or has legs or whatever. But there will be this continued friction around states, inflicting wounds, kind of self-inflicted wounds around unnecessary regulation at this stage in the game. We had some bills going through our legislative session currently that aim to restrict artificial intelligence in healthcare applications, for example. I know this is not necessarily autonomous driving, but not too far afield. And so, but it wasn't based in any actual science. Certainly wasn't based in any kind of tort issues or anything like that. It just gave people the scaries, frankly. And so they decided to try to introduce regulation to rein it back in. That's the kind of stuff we have to continue to fight against, and just educate lawmakers, stakeholders that at this point in the ballgame, no regulation is the best framework to have on this, because we just don't know what the implications are going to be. So let's get involved with creating test beds and test areas and test boundaries so that we can then better inform what policy looks like at the state and local level, before we just introduce it because it feels right.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you bring up a good point too about, getting the scaries. And one way to combat that is through education. So it really comes full circle there. Tara, coming back to you here, during the event, we collected some feedback on the event itself and attendees' perceptions of AVs. Can you give us sort of a high-level overview of what we found and what some of the key themes were?
For sure. I will say we were thrilled with what we heard back from folks. We gave everyone a survey, and just to kind of give a real quick overview of what we asked about. So the way the day worked, we had probably about 20 exhibits. Like Caitlin, you and Greg both mentioned, we had exhibitors who brought demos and different things. So we had booths that people could visit. We did have both a Kodiak truck and a Waymo car. There was a whole day of programming, so there were different panels and speakers throughout the day. Louisiana's Secretary of Transportation was the keynote speaker. We also had the posters that I mentioned that people could visit and see some of the research that students have been doing. And so then we asked people at the end of the day what they thought. And it was on a scale of 1 to 5. So I'm kind of considering 4 and 5 the yes. But so we asked people if they had learned new information about CAV technologies, and 91.3% said they had. We asked people if they would recommend the event to others, and 93.8% said they would. It was interesting. We asked if about 90% of people said they would like a ride in an autonomous vehicle at a future event. So we'll have to work on that. A lot of people said their favorite part of the event was being able to see the car on the truck, like we've been talking about. These aren't communities where, like in San Francisco, where you just see autonomous cars driving around all the time. And so for a lot of people, kind of seeing the car with the LiDAR on top and actually, seeing this in person is pretty cool. And then we also asked, other suggestions. A lot of people said to bring it to other states. So, they thought it was a really great event for Louisiana, and that other states should be able to witness a similar event. So we were, yeah, pretty happy that we got such positive feedback. And like we said, it was the first time for Louisiana, so great to hear that people enjoyed the event so much.
Absolutely. And to sort of build on that, Greg, coming out of Innovation Day and considering the feedback from attendees that Tara just talked about, what are some of the next steps or initiatives that are in motion now? And how do you plan to maintain this momentum?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So a big part of the maintaining the momentum is going to be continuing to work with DOTD, our ITS client. And then, again, this event, I think, helped put this discussion on the radar of the decision makers. Like you mentioned, Tara, the secretary was there. So that's great. This puts this on his radar, and to see him interact with the technology was great. And then, working with Josh Fleig to align this with the larger goals of the state. Again, this naturally put some synergies in motion, and put some initiatives on the radar to say, okay, if we have these options, how can we move forward? And then, I think that the biggest challenge probably moving forward, I appreciate Josh's statement around, no regulation needed. I agree with that, but then you still have to overcome some of the concerns related to safety. And I think that is, where we hopefully get some momentum to do more events like this. Hopefully we get to do another larger one next year, like Tara mentioned, where we find the right balance of programming with the demos, and make it be more perhaps a 2-day thing, where you also get more of the networking. And one of the things that I think the networking can be based on, or the discussions, is before we did the actual event last month, we put out a request for engagement to industry at the beginning of the year. That request for engagement was kind of our first temperature check to figure out, does industry want to engage? They wholeheartedly said yes, which allowed us to continue to move forward. But we do have all these responses from over 20 companies providing potential solutions for CAV technology in Louisiana and how they want to partner. So I think we want to start there to figure out, okay, where are these synergies that align both what DOTD wants to be doing, what Josh and the governor's office wants to be doing, and then how does that align with what we're seeing on the national side of things, whether that be connected autonomous vehicles, AI, or even advanced air mobility, which I know is on Louisiana's radar as well.
Definitely. Well, before we wrap up here, I want to ask you all one sort of final question, which is, what is one key takeaway or maybe call to action you hope public and private sector leaders can walk away with after today's discussion, considering, what we've talked about and this event? So maybe Josh, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think what we demonstrated, on our demo day, and it's education is important so that people aren't scared of this stuff, because it's coming. The investment is very real. The technology works, and it's only going to get bigger and better and deployed all over the world. And so the sooner we can get, stakeholders and lawmakers and just folks who live in the community to understand the impacts, the better. So the show and tell aspect actually is super important. And yeah, I think, our goal is to work with you guys again next year and do it bigger and better. So excited to keep this, full court press on the education side of this in our community.
Greg, do you want to take the next spot?
Sure, I'll go quickly because I know Tara probably has some thoughts as well. But I think even to one of the questions in the chat of what are people's reactions related, to things like facial recognition and AI, I think again the largest opportunity here is, as Josh just mentioned, is to continue to hone in on what people are concerned about related to innovation and to people help people understand, we're not looking to just blanketly deploy the technology without understanding where the gaps are, and vice versa. We want industry to help figure out, what are the solutions and what's needed to make sure this is successful. Yes, there's the national conversation, but then there's the Louisiana conversation. And I think that's what I really appreciate and was kind of a big inspiration of this. And I, welcome, talking with, nearby states to Louisiana as well, is how to make sure a state doesn't feel like it's just a drive-through state. Instead, kind of like what Josh is saying, it's taking control of this opportunity and trying to understand how to right size it with both its needs, whether it be economic development, whether it be safety, and then how to align it with, the larger regional opportunities. And I think, the word corridors, we're going to hear more and more about. And just excited to continue to track and help support that.
And I guess from my perspective, I just want to underscore what Josh said. I guess it won't be surprising for me that education, I think, is really is so critically important, especially as in DC and around the country when they're looking at legislation and bills. Really engaging with the public, really making sure people understand the technology. The technology is not going to be helpful if people say, I will never get in one of those cars. We really need to make sure that people have exposure to the technology, that they understand it, that they feel safe in it. And so really proactively engaging with the public, I think is just so critical. And then also, I always look at kind of AV deployments as it takes a village. It takes the public sector and the private sector and safety groups, all of these, like PAVE members, like United Spinal and National Federation of the Blind and National Council on Aging, all these different groups who are so important, whose constituencies could so greatly benefit from these new technologies. All of these groups working together to make sure that transportation needs are met, that gaps are addressed, that we find a solution that works for each community. So that's really the purpose of these kinds of events, is to bring all these players together and to make sure those conversations are happening and to let everyone learn a few things and have a good time. So yeah, again, we were thrilled with how this event went, and but like Josh said, there's always bigger and better things to do in the future. So look forward to many more.
Yeah, Caitlin and Taryn, if I could just throw in, one thing that I really want to highlight is, probably similar to the pressure of the technology to perform perfectly. I think we all felt a lot of pressure to make sure the event went well. Because if it didn't go well, then you kind of have a flop related to the technology, which may impact, the public education and visibility side of things. So kind of long way of saying is, we put a lot of work into this. I want to, make sure people realize that. And we had a willing partner, and we made sure that we cultivated, the sponsorships and really leverage our networks. So again, I just want to say thank you to you all for the great work you did. I need to try and highlight the great shirt that Caitlin put together that says Louisiana CAV Innovation Day. So yeah, it was, again, this total team effort to make sure all the bases were covered that helped make the event successful. So kind of a long put together a great team, and then you can really be inspired to do great things. So just wanted to give you all some credit. Thank you, Caitlin and Tara, for everything you did.
Well said. And thank you, Greg. It was really a team effort. And I think to Tara's point, moving forward, if we're going to, have these technologies be a part of our daily lives in the future, it's going to be a team effort to get to that point. So thank you so much for taking the time today, Tara, Greg, and Josh. Really appreciate your insights and thoughts. Just an administrative note, we will be posting the full video recording to our YouTube channel and website later today. So keep an eye out for that and follow us on social media to see that as soon as it's released. So thanks everybody who attended and participated. We really appreciate it.